know lots of you already. What I thought I would do, I have a feeling that I'm preaching to the converted comes to mind. I think there's a lot of expertise in the room about this topic and a lot of ideas. So what I see myself in my role right now is just giving you the CoDev example. So I'm just going to talk about the stuff that we've done, the things we've butt our heads up against. I have some pictures, and then we can just, it'll just fuel the discussion for further on. Obviously, I think we've seen already that partnership is really heterogeneous. You know, it's different for each one of us. So the CoDev example is really only one of many, as you know. So thanks for having us over. I wrote down a phrase that my yoga teacher uses, which is embrace the wobble. So, you know, when you're up on a leg and you're kind of like, whoa, he's like, just, it's all right, just, you know. And I feel like that's kind of, in partnership, that's kind of what we have to do. Just, you know, it's going to wobble, it's going to not work, and it's going to be okay and not okay, and just, you know, forge ahead, embrace it, and move along with what you've got. So anyway, I just thought of that just now. So I'm a little all over the place. I'm going to give you a bit of background on CoDev. I'm going to talk about the sort of the theory, how it all works out for us in partnership. I'll give you some concrete examples, and then we can just pass it on, and I'll go as quickly as I can. So CoDevelopment Canada, I'm not sure how many of you, well, there's our logo right there, good. So there was something that made me think of our logo, because our logo used to be arrows going up and going down, going all the way around. Now it got modernized, but that's the whole idea of CoDev, is co-development. So that development isn't something that we do. It's something that happens all over the place. We had the advantage, I'll give, for those of you who don't know the organization, we have the advantage of starting from a model of solidarity. So CoDev came out of the BC Teachers Federation. A group of teachers here in BC were, and activists within the BCTF were interested in the struggles of teachers in Peru in the 80s. They were looking at gender equality and had seen a news piece and made a trip and basically said, hey, this is something that we understand. This is something that we've been through. We don't want to, you know, help you get out of that. We're not going to, you know, go right in and show you how to get out of the situation you're in. But we get it. We've been through this. So let's talk together. So as an organization, we started right out with that idea of solidarity. It wasn't about charity. It wasn't about, you know, giving, you know, helping. That whole, all of that language was not a part of our organization's beginnings. Also, as any of you who work in the union movement know, solidarity is a word that is already a part of that movement. So people understood from a union perspective that solidarity was really peer-to-peer, was worker to worker, was standing together. And so the whole base of the organization starts from that. I feel very privileged to work in that environment because it's a given. You know, that part is a given from, that's what we understand when we talk about it. So our partnership model has three elements to it. There's CoDev, there's our partners in Latin America, and our partners in Canada, who are, for the most part, trade unions. So we work with the Teachers Federation, the nurses, the Hospital Employees Union, Federation of Post-Secondary Educators, etc. And so we see ourselves very much as one of three partners rather than two. So we are working with our partners here in Canada as well as our partners in Latin America, and I can tell you more about that a little bit later on.
Do you want us to move your picture?
No, not yet. I'll get there. You gotta listen to me for a little bit longer. I had written right here, understand that it's not perfect. I think we've covered that. It's, you know, it sounds great in theory. It's not always perfect. So how does this play out at CoDev? What are the actual things that we do in this partnership model. How do we make it work? So to begin with, all of us have lived in Latin America. Again, that's a privilege, right? And we can't all have lived in the countries that we're working at. But in that way, it allows us in the office to have a really intimate knowledge and respect for the countries. So when I have a partner coming up, I can talk about being a single mom. I can talk about, I can use vocabulary that'll make them laugh. Like I can use the words in Nicaragua that you use for this thing, and I can make jokes and show them that I have an understanding of their culture. Same with everyone, with Barbara, with Steve, with Kyla, and with Kirsten. So that for us is also a sort of a good base to start from. But also, for us, part of partnership and solidarity involves looking at the root causes of the problem. And this was something Moses brought up in our small group there. That we look at you know, the problem. My program area is in the sweatshops, in the textile factories in Latin America. So I look at the problems those workers are having. And, you know, fine, we can give them, you know, we can provide funds so that our partners can train them in self-esteem and labor rights and all those sorts of things. But fundamentally, we have to, at CoDev, look at the root causes of that and encourage our partners to do that. I must say, though, most of the time it's the other way around. Our partners are already way beyond that. And they are already saying to us, the reason our workers are getting paid badly is because there's no legal framework in our country to protect them. And the reason there's no legal framework is because your companies are coming down and do, you know, so they're already telling us what the root causes are. And so that plays a little bit into the long-term thing that Joe was talking about as well, that if you're looking at the root causes, it's a very different approach. It's a very different sort of time frame. But also, that allows you to make the comparison with workers here. It allows you to say, well, you know what? Monsanto's in Alberta as well as in Africa. Wait a minute, we have the same enemies. This is the same struggle. And again, it's a very much a worker to worker, it's a union vocabulary, but it serves us very well in our partnership model. It's a very deep thing. It's not just a checklist. I mean, the checklists that we get, the toolkit, it's super, super useful. I'm going to point you towards another one as well. But it's really a mindset. I know we had a Colombian partner up one time, and she said, this was years ago, and I got goosebumps when she said it. She said, you know what, neoliberalism and, you know, colonialism and all that stuff, it's a play. And it was written in Bretton Woods, or Paris, or London, or New York, or Washington. You're in Act 1 here in Canada. We're in Act 3 in Colombia. So the privatization of all your public services, your education, your water, we're way ahead of you, but you're there too, and you have to fight. And I tell you, it changed the whole dynamic in the room. People were saying, oh my God, she's totally right. You know, we are in this together. We have the same struggles. So, again, that just really changed the whole way that people in the room and ourselves were thinking about it. We had a Guatemalan partner up, one of our coffee partners, and people were, had heard her talk about her coffee cooperative and all that stuff. And then somebody very well-meaning said, well, what can we do to help? How can we help you? And she said, well, change your government. And they were like, oh. They were thinking money, they were thinking machines, they were thinking visits. No, she said, change your government. Change the things you do here to change the whole dynamic of everything. So really putting the onus back on us, saying, you've got to change the way you do things in order for things to change there. As we mentioned also, though, this kind of partnership takes constant vigilance. It's so easy to slip back into those practices of, where's your report? Hurry up with your report. Come on, I need it. It's really easy. You have to be always thinking about those things. Questioning your privilege and your position in so many of the things that you do. You know, I was talking with Kirsten this morning, and she said, well, you gotta bring up Foucault and the whole idea of the other. And I thought, well, I'll mention that, you can think about it. But it is that idea of separating, you know, of realizing, it was Vera's excellent drawing, that we are different, but we are the same too, right? And acknowledging that and working with it. Other things. Accountability for us, I'm going quickly here. Accountability for us, which is part of partnerships, is really sort of a spider web. You know, we don't see accountability just to CEDA or just to our northern partners. We feel very accountable to our southern partners and to each other in the office and to the people we work with here in Canada. So you know, that for a partnership to work, and I think it was Noel who said, you have to come into it, even if you don't have a lot to bring, with an idea of accountability, even if it's just, you know, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be honest with you. So that's sort of the theoretical part of how partnership works at CoDev. Just super fast, you guys probably know about it, but the CCIC also has an excellent code of ethics with a whole guideline of tick boxes. I mean, tick boxes are not the answer, obviously, but they can get you on the road. So I would encourage you to look that up.
You have a link for that, I think.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in this. It may not be on that, but I can put it up later on.
We can get that one.
Yeah. So what I did with the PowerPoint was I just pulled out some pictures to go along with what I'm going to talk about in our concrete examples of how we make our partnership as equitable as we can in our day-to-day functioning. So we'll go really quickly through them. It's just to give you some pictures in your head. They're not, it's not a spectacular, Justice Education Society, I think. So he was one of the co-founders of CoDev. Note the glasses, you can tell more or less what decade we're in. All right, next one. So for example, one of the things that we've done in trying to really connect people on a thematic level was we facilitated a labor lawyers exchange in Nicaragua. So our partners in Nicaragua have labor lawyers that work with women in the textile industry. We got a bunch of people from the Lower Mainland to go down and had a series of sort of workshops. What are the things that what are the problems you run into? How did you resolve them? All that sort of stuff. We had, you know, full-on translation. That one didn't work so well. The legal codes were different enough that it was like, oh, we don't have to deal with that. Oh, well, okay. So something like that, I would do a little more research, maybe try to finesse it in a different way. Go ahead, Shem.
So Carol, can I ask you that just in terms of your starting point, it seems like you're not. It's not on a project basis. You're looking at systemic issues on the ground in terms of laws, labor practices. So it's much more expansive.
Yeah. So CoDev, a lot of what we do is capacity building, and that's stuff that has a start and maybe not an end, or maybe a different end than you thought. And it does go on and on. The partners that we worked with here, we started working with in 1995. No, before that, 1992, I think, these guys. So
long-term relationship.
Very long-term, and very much, what are you going to do for the next 3 years? What are you going to work on? So these partners, for example, came to us 7 years ago and said, look, we've got all these workers, they have all these legal problems, and they've got nowhere to go. They can't afford lawyers. So we want to open a mediation center and have like a roving band of labor lawyers to help these women take their claims into the Ministry of Labor. And we said, okay. And so when they came to us with that idea, we sort of looked at our funders, we talked to our Canadian partners and said, this is their idea, can you get behind it? And they were all like, sounds fantastic, let's go. CEDA, we kind of finessed it, so it looked pretty close to what they wanted us to be doing, and away we went. So yeah, long-term partners. And then Sandra came up and had a meeting, and she said, you know, it'd be really great to have an exchange with labor lawyers. And so we said, oh, that's a good idea. I moved ahead with it. So yeah, longer term, and more about a relationship as opposed to a project. Shall we move? This was hilarious. We did a worker-to-worker exchange in Cuba in 2004 with CUPE workers. And so this was an electrician who was a member of CUPE, a municipal electrician in Havana, working with his Cuban counterpart. Again, a great idea. I think people learned a lot, but it was very difficult to help people connect. Translation being one of the main difficulties. So, if our partners, trade unions or women's movements, are in struggles, we do what we can to participate. It can be writing letters. Here, this was Cancun. Larry Keane on the left from the BC Teachers Federation. The other one, reprobate the red scarf, is my colleague Steve. So, we go down and as much as we can, participate in their struggles, so they feel that we are with them. And again, in Honduras, before the free trade agreement came down a little while ago, so there were our partners came and said, we need to go and meet with your prime minister and protest. Can you translate the signs for me? I said, okay, I'll translate your signs. And so they were there. I'm not sure much happened. The free trade agreement was signed and away they went. But they could count on us for that. And then in the middle, Carlos Gonzalez is a Colombian trade unionist who came up and went on a march with us in Ottawa. And then we have several examples of them. So again, they come up and understand what we're going through.
How do you choose your partners, Karen?
Well, it takes a long time. It depends. We haven't taken on a lot of new partners recently. We started working in Colombia in 2003. So that is the most recent example I can think of. We realized that Colombia is the most dangerous place to be a trade unionist. So I've got to work there. CUPE was behind that a lot of the way, as well as the BC Government Employees Union. So fact-finding missions. So they went down, talked to different trade unions, talked to partners, tried to sort of, through people that you trust, get a hold of somebody who you know you can talk to and say, there's a lot of factions here, who can we work with? It probably took about 5 years to find a partner to work with. We've just started with another one in Colombia, and I don't think we'll continue with them for various logistic reasons. So we find that we look at a common understanding of the world. We look for a project initially, a short one, that we can fit in to our partners' priorities and our priorities. But it involves a lot of research, a lot of talking to people and finding out who is the best to work with. Does that answer your question? But the short answer is we don't take on new partners very easily. It's hard. So just an example of an exchange in Colombia. We have teachers, there's Steve translating, you're right in there, making the connections happen. So these partnerships can take on they look very different in different places. So in Cuba, for example, what they really like is for leaders to come and do these big sort of shows of solidarity in their conventions. So, CUPE BC president, CUPE national president, CUPE Quebec president, secretary, these are high-level trade unionists in the Canadian trade union movement that, that was part of what they wanted from us, was for them to come down and show a presence, show their solidarity that way. So I wouldn't have thought that was, for me that's not really important, but for them it certainly was, so off we went. We also do workers. So I took a group of nurses down to El Salvador and they did health days. So then you're out in the field, you're translating, you're hot, you guys have all been there, you're dusting, you're making the meeting of the minds happen. So there was, during the coup in Honduras and the repression that happened afterwards, we were down there visiting with some partners. And they really valued that we were willing to be there. This was perhaps a little foolhardy, being this close to the front lines, but our partners really valued that. That's a terrible picture, but this was, again, a thematic exchange. So sort of like the labor lawyers, it was on occupational health and safety in Honduras, and we had a 3-day exchange, again brought out of bringing a partner up, being in a meeting and her saying, it'd be great if you guys would come down and talk to us about how you have moved ahead in occupational health and safety in your unions. And we'll talk about the organizing that we're doing. So I had people here work very hard and prepare 3 days of presentations, and we went down and we translated. You can go to the next one. So high level, or a lot of different partners. BC Federation of Labor, QP, BCGU, PSAC all participated. Our partners made a big commitment. They had 30 people come in for a 3-day exchange, and it was great. That one actually worked because rotator cuffs are rotator cuffs, and spinal injuries are spinal injuries, and so they were able to, our Canadian partners were amazed by how our Honduran partners bring people into workshops. Like, how do you do that? Like, how do you organize? So as union organizers, it was great for them to hear of different models, but for the Hondurans, it was also great to see where they could aim for in their occupational health and safety legislation. So a lot of work, as you can see, involved in these kinds of things, but they're really great. Let's try the next one, see where we're at. 5 minutes. Thanks. So young workers, this time we decided to take young people from unions down. We said to the unions, this will make these young workers interested in doing union work. So we related what we were doing to something that would benefit them here. And they're like, oh, sure, we'll pay for that. Great. And it blew the minds of these young workers. And I can tell you, they're thinking about their brothers and sisters in Central America as they do their work here. Well, another one, we can keep going. There's a lot of different things. We have donor events when we're here to try to bring the partnership to make it more real. This was the event that you guys were just at as educators. Same thing, we brought up 35 Latin Americans for a conference and really worked at having exchanges. Café Ético is our fair trade coffee. So again, meeting them as equals in some way, right? Fair trade is a very important part of that. I'm going to buy your coffee. You're a producer. I'm going to buy it. It's not charity. You make good coffee, and I want to buy it. So that's Kirsten, who some of you may know, with her farmers down in Nicaragua. Anyway, that was just a picture of coffee. Let me just make sure I covered everything I needed to do. I thought it would be important, I may not have time, maybe later on, but just to talk about when it goes wrong. Because that, to me, is the real test of a partnership. I think, as Anita said, there's a lot of really excellent goals that we have, a lot of principles that we bring into play. But, what if you have a partner in Nicaragua, say, for example, who is, hitting on the members of your delegation and other donor groups, and, really within the organization, there's no awareness of gender. He's, patting his people on the bum and stuff. Like, what do you do? How do you get out of that? I think part of a clear partnership is having things in place so that you can go through that. It took us a year, almost 2 years to get, pardon the expression, to get rid of that partner, to say, I'm sorry, we can't work with you. Started out identifying the problem. You really can't do this. You really have to, and started looking at the organization and saying, okay, well, what do you guys have in place to make sure that there isn't harassment going on? And then did an evaluation, and then eventually said, well, we set out some goals for you that you didn't really meet. So, in the next year, we're going to give you 1 more year, then we'll cut the funding. So, anyway, I think that's worth a larger discussion. It's all very well to say all of these good things, but those can go by the wayside.
But see, that also, that piece actually really demonstrates partnership, because you're not just saying, oh, you've acted inappropriately, goodbye. You give an opportunity for, change, and you give it time.
Well, and listen first.
Dialogue,
always, right?
yeah.
So
yeah.
What I'm seeing is this. Is that really happening? Okay, well, you talk a lot about gender, but then you're doing these things, and so respond to me. Tell me what, and it does. It takes a lot of time. And that was very painful. I mean, it was a personal friend from Nicaragua, a guy I knew. And I was like, but I think clarity is a really big part of that. Yeah. Yeah, that'll probably do for now.
I was just thinking,
thank you
for getting us
Thank you.